Welcome to the That Guy in Cambodia podcast. This is the first episode, and you can likely hear chickens and traffic in the background. It's just part of life here in Cambodia. I'm excited to share with you some of the amazing individuals I've met on my adventures following God here in Cambodia. Today's guest is relatively new to Cambodia and does a good job of bringing up some of those expectation versus reality moments as a new Christian missionary in Cambodia. We'll be hearing from a survivor of the Khmer Rouge in episode 2, and I have more guests that are lined up that I hope inspire you to follow God's calling in your life, no matter what or where it may be. Hey, welcome. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing here in Cambodia.
My name's Will, and been in Cambodia now for coming up on 2.5 years, so still pretty fresh, pretty green. I'm here with my wife, Michaela. We just had a baby boy about 6 months ago, so now he's a part of the team as well. And we came with a vision, feeling God's call to working with minority peoples here in Cambodia and learning language, learning culture, and just moved out actually 6 months ago from the capital city to a more rural location, but still with Khmer people group. Maybe another 6 months, we'll be making one more transition to focus in on some of the minority people groups here.
Super good. So for one, many missionaries don't ever make it out of Phnom Penh. They kind of get stuck in Phnom Penh, whether it's for kids' school or different opportunities. So what got you out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I felt that pull a little bit with Phnom Penh because I think coming to Cambodia, we were really focused on, it's going to be so different. It's going to be hard. We're going to get off the plane and it's just the world is flipped upside down.
Dust and like huts and
right.
crazy foods.
And turned out we had an apartment that was nicer than our home in America for much cheaper. They have incredible food delivery service here for very cheap. So we lived very affordably, especially by American standards, but very comfortably. Seemed a little bit like a drawback to go to a more rural location where there's none of those amenities. But I think for us, it was the calling, the vision that God had put on our hearts. And there's a need everywhere for the word of God to be shared and for people to be trained and discipled. But Phnom Penh has so much of that already. And we really felt the vision God had put on our hearts was the unreached. And that was the reason we joined OMF in the first place, was emphasis on reaching these unreached places. So we knew it was time, and I'm going for it. So when the door opened, we were just kind of ready. We just jumped.
You don't know how many missionaries have that similar experience. And I felt that myself as well. Well, everything's kind of working well here. And there's people to reach here, especially after you go out into the villages where there's no other Christians.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I just felt so convicted. This is where God was calling me.
Yeah. Dude, a quick story that just happened like the other week.
Tell me.
I went over to a neighbor's house, and the grandma there, who I call the grandma's Yay. So the Yay there, she was sick. So for the first time, they know I'm Christian, but for the first time I really kind of took a step, said, well, hey, can I pray for you?
Yes.
And just briefly explain, when we're praying, we're talking to our Father. God is our dad. So then I said, okay, so can I pray? And they were very open. Yeah. And then one of the women there goes, okay, so what do we do?
Right.
And I asked, what do you mean, what do you do? You don't have to do anything. So then as I start praying, she starts repeating after me. As I finish the prayer, later on, I asked my very experienced and very knowledgeable teammates what was going on. Just coming to find out, for one, that's often the pattern with the monks is you're chanting. And so there's a repeating action happening. So she was kind of thinking that's what I was wanting.
Yeah.
And secondly, a lot of times you're making merit. So you're paying something or you're giving something for that prayer, for that blessing. And so I didn't know that at times. Again, there's some important culture learning that needs to take place. But what an incredible message now that I can come back to that and say, it's God's grace. You don't have to give anything. And so you think and you hear, you have this dream, people who don't know who Jesus is, but you don't picture these situations where someone doesn't know how you actually pray to God.
Yes.
Yeah, you see stuff like that and it's like, oh my goodness, this is where we need to be.
Amen. That is a perfect
example, because another piece was that was why many people in some of the church plants here, they would report, oh, wow, we had 20 people come to know Christ because they repeated the sinner's prayer. That's good, because all they were doing was, okay, repeat, chant, okay.
Right.
And then the next week, there was only a few people that showed up. And so it's like, what's going on here? And you follow up with some of those people, and they were thinking, okay, I tried this Christian prayer thing, and it didn't really help me that much this week. So it's a totally, and oftentimes at the Wat, even my Khmer friends have no idea what they're chanting or what they're repeating.
Yeah. I think we all have to be cautious of this in whatever context we're in, is that you see that example of them praying the prayer and then not coming up. And then you make a judgment. These people are just wishy-washy. They don't actually stand by what they believe or what, and you make these judgments without really understanding what's going on, and that you're actually the one making an issue, causing the confusion. So
great point.
Yeah.
So, well, another thing, it's that much different with cultural Christianity in the States, right? People will hooray, but you're kind of, do you really mean those words? Are you really saying those to God, or are you just saying those out loud to all of us?
Right.
So I really feel these situations, when there's humility involved, you can kind of see, oh, I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. I felt very convicted. There's a point being here where I realized, man, I just threw around the word pray so casually. Yeah, I'll pray for you. Pray for that. And definitely, it was just a hot word. So definitely something to do some self-reflection on.
That's a really cool thing in terms of culturally, like God has already prepared a lot of Khmer people's hearts for prayer is sacred. God is sacred. There is something as a sacred space.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of a cool thing that maybe I don't see in some of the more developed countries all the time.
Absolutely. Please tell me someone's talked about royal language before.
Not yet. So tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, I'll just give a 10-second spiel because I don't want to bore everyone out there. But so many words that are usually verbs for God are different than words used for us humans. And just for a while, that was so frustrating as a language learner. Okay, why is it that when Jesus speaks, I have to say this long phrase every single time, but it's not the same word as for Will speaks or Travis speaks? There is a hierarchy. God is above us. He's holy. So we can't use these same words that we use for ordinary people doing ordinary things. Like, God is totally different level from us, and really shaped, challenging me with my theology, my views of God, that, like, yes, God's my friend, and that's usually what I would like claim to. I think it's much more equal, but seeing, no, man, he's my king.
Yes.
And even like the Khmer word for Lord, we use the word Lord, I just think God. It's the same thing. But like the Khmer word is the God that is the master.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The all majestic God. Yeah.
Right. And it's just so much more regal, so much more. He is the authority over our lives.
Yes.
And so I just think there's a lot to learn, even from just the language, about how God has made us and our relationship with him. So that was really good for me learning that.
Yeah, well, I think brings up a really good cultural point, because maybe in the States, just culturally trying to be more egalitarian, it comes in direct contrast to there is very much a blatant hierarchy, and that's not a bad thing.
Right.
And that actually people in higher authority are supposed to be tending and caring for more people. And so it's not a bad thing. It actually works. But the idea is that, yeah, we don't use the same language. There is a show of respect and perhaps growing disrespect in a lot of discourse that goes on in the States.
Sure.
But that it is woven into the language. And I don't know, if you're not studying Khmer, it's hard to describe these, but maybe if you know another language, you have similar words, but it's just that idea that it's literally a whole new set of vocabulary for when you refer to the king acts, does, decrees, says, speaks, hears. All of those are totally different words. And the way you refer to yourself in the presence of a king is very different. The tu bung kom instead of kinyom.
Yeah. This is the same process, but I'm just curious. I'm talking about respect. There's like a lot more titles here in Cambodia than back in the States. And just asking personally, do you get people calling you teacher, lokru? And how do you respond? Do you take that, or do you ask them to call you something else?
right, back in the States, when I'm a teacher, you're trying to be relatable in some ways. If you're young, wisdom then later is, well, there's got to be, you have to take on that mantle of authority, but you can do it in a loving and way. And some of the kids actually want you to, beg you to. But yeah, they would call me Mr. Papa and stuff like that, or Pops, or. But then here, in Cambodia, you're right. People call you teacher, or Lakhu in Phnom Penh, but Lakhu in Siem Reap. But then the other thing is really funny is that people call you Ticha, and then they shorten it to Cha for the Khmer word for wood. But anyway, yes, it's a respectful title. And I learned that my language teacher is like, hey, call me Lakhu, even back in the States when I was studying Khmer. And so he was, do not call me by my name, call me Lakhu. At first, that was kind of weird. But then I realized it was kind of nice because we had an established relationship.
Right.
Oh, yes, you are the master. I am the apprentice.
Yep.
And it was kind of nice. We fit into those roles really well.
Right.
And I actually don't mind it when people call me Lakhu. And actually, in several contexts, that's my relationship with people. If I'm teaching them, they call me Lakhu. I have the ability to speak and give them advice on life, whether they want to do it or not.
Yeah.
It kind of gives me this new authority, kind of like I would listen to my elders.
Yeah.
And at first, I think there were a few times I was like, oh, don't call me teacher. But then I realized that's not helpful because they actually are used to and want that sort of relationship.
Right.
I don't know. How have you handled that?
Yeah, the same process as you. And I think for me, the big hurdle was that there's a different word which you would use respectful, but it's much more casual for older brother, bong. I would so badly be like, no, teacher feels distant.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's just been a journey of realizing that just because there is hierarchy does not mean there's distance in the relationship. You came when I was observing Khmer pastors and realizing that they a lot of times refer to each other in that way. They would use these words, Lokru and teacher, but they were really close too. So it's not, I'm saying, US, if I call you my teacher, we're not friends usually. But here it can be different, and it's more so just finding where do you fit in the society, in the hierarchy. Yeah.
I was listening to someone in the States, and she was reading through just some of the gender roles, and she was saying how, as an American, it was really freeing for her to acknowledge that, hey, in some cultures, there are gender roles, and that's not a bad thing. And if anything, it helps people know where they fit into the culture, into the society. Whereas in the States, forget gender norms and all this stuff, and then people feel kind of lost. What am I? Who am I? And it's, well, that's kind of what happens when you throw away the roles. You have to define new ones, or you have to make up new ones. It's okay. I've seen a lot of Westerners try to throw away gender norms that are actually comfort. There can be negatives, of course. There can be a lot of positives as well. But I think besides gender norms, it's just those norms of hierarchical teacher or the police or the government or et cetera.
Right.
How have you navigated that as an American?
It's so different from my background where, just to give you an example, I worked at a church in Florida, and my boss, the lead pastor, was my friend, and I'd call him by his name.
Yeah.
And if I were to call him boss, I think I did it once or twice, he'd say, don't call me your boss. I'm just Andy. But here, you do that and you could really offend somebody, or even to the point where it's disrespectful. Why would you not recognize this person for worked hard to get to that place? You should honor them. And so I think learning what does it look to show honor here, and we don't think about that a whole lot back in the US, but we do it.
Yes.
We know how to honor people. We just might use a different word. When you typically think of honor in a Western context, what comes to mind for you?
I guess quick honor would be the way you respect or treat them, maybe the way you give them authority willingly. You don't resist their authority. You compliment or praise them, not even just to them, but to others. That's like kind of a way of honoring people. I guess that, like, I'm trying to think of honor your father and mother. Most of that looks in a Western context. But to me, growing up was listen, obey. I don't know. What do you think?
I think of big way, at least I know, I don't think we use the word honor per se. Usually it's like, man, that person really treated me well, or they really gave me their attention. Man, they asked me a lot of questions and wanted to get to know me. And we wouldn't say, wow, that guy honored me. But essentially, that's what's happening. They're showing value.
Yeah, that's a good point. Whenever I've said, oh man, it's an honor to spend time with you, I usually say that to someone who I really respect and I want to be like.
Interesting how you get different personalities, and even what is respectful to that personality is going to be different. What my wife, some friend, is very different from like what I want.
Could you give an example?
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to make my wife's day, show her honor, just get her a treat. We have friends who have sent her a special coffee or something. That's a big deal to her. For me, wow, that's a nice thought, but
Yeah.
not as big a deal.
You and I are very similar in that. How do people honor you? Is it with the quality time or a conversation? What?
As I think a little bit all over the place. I'm definitely a verbal processor. I'm someone who's just, I like to think about things and just talk through ideas. Someone's willing to kind of be patient and step into that and explore something with me and offer some thoughts. That means a lot to me in the long run. So that's a big thing for me.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of thoughts to explore, we have quite a few on the table. What were some of those biggest shifts to like what you expected mission work to be like? Now being 2.5 years in, coming up on 3, how's it feel now? And what are some of those major differences?
Yeah, that's a good question. All of my imaginations, my expectations came from either a young single guy or maybe someone who had married guy with no kids. It's changed a lot, my perspective. A lot of times, just I feel like I'm confessing now, but I would kind of like look down a little bit and be like, man, these people with their kids, they're not willing to sacrifice as much, or they're more inward focused. And now I'm in it and realizing how much time and energy it takes to effectively and lovingly pour into your kids and your family, to each other as a spouse.
Yeah.
So I think my reality has set in that my perspective on what missions looks like, it's much more holistic. It's not just you go out, you just go pioneer and you're just like hiking through the woods and come back on the weekends to visit your family or whatever. But you're as a family, and that some of the greatest encouragement I've received from other missionaries has been stories where they were actually just taking care of their family, and that's what stood out to local people, realizing, yeah, we do need to be bold. We do need focus on going out and sharing about Jesus. But really the way that we function within our own family circle is kind of the foundation for everything else that happens. That's been hard, and I have not learned as quickly as I would have hoped, but it's been good.
Yeah, I think coming onto the field single and comparing it to where I am now, it's like, yeah, the time, energy, capacity to do stuff or to get involved with stuff or to do things so quickly.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely changed. The way that really helped me conceptualize it, because I think this actually held me back from starting a family for a while, because I was like, what does happen to goals, mission, purpose in life? And I think something that was really comforting to me is to think about how this is a big part of the ministry. I'm hopeful that my wife and kid can continue on with the ministry and do so much more than I can do.
Yeah.
And that gets me excited in terms of pouring into my family, because I know it's going to the kingdom in a way. And I also believe that it's a reflection, of God's love for us too.
Right. Yeah. And I think that so often we like to throw around, whether it's church ministry or missions, we like to talk about multiplication. And it's exciting. Multiplication's, it's bigger than addition. You start getting into the math, nerding out. And it's exciting. Usually happens is that multiplication initially is a lot slower and would seem a lot less efficient than just adding numbers. Taking that time to invest in your child, it doesn't seem at first it's really going to pay off. I mean, I'm talking very pragmatically.
Yeah.
But from what I've seen with other families, I'm just beginning, but families that are further down the road, and then seeing what their kids and the lives that they're leading, you realize when you talk about impact, sometimes it's just that focusing small, and whether it's your family or whether it's someone in your community, just being so intentional with that one. Not saying you have to put all your eggs in one basket, but just being super intentional. The payoff in the long run sometimes will blow us away. What God does, something very seemingly insignificant. So it's so hard to remember that though, because it feels slow. It's like, great, I've been here 2 years and I can carry on a basic conversation. Great.
I remember the language thing being such a frustration over and over again.
Sure.
But I do compliment you. I think you've really excelled in language quite a bit, and then you continue to push. I know it's harder now with the family and more time with the family, less time outside.
Sure.
So, yeah. In terms of language, culture, people, what threw you for a loop?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the language, before coming here, I had experience just trying to learn Spanish in high school. And then in college, I got to attend a Spanish church for a little bit. So I'm familiar with trying to learn a language, but had never attempted anything beyond nothing in Asia or Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Coming to terms with reality of all these sounds that are so different, there had to be a mind shift for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably after about a year, I realized this is going to be a really long journey. And I have to recognize what is the purpose of this year for me and this term, these 4 years. Because initially I would have said, man, I've got these goals and I want to do this many churches planted. I mean, I had numbers, I had this idea, and realizing, man, it sounds really slow. If by the end of these 4 years, I'm like settled in Cambodia, I know how to get around, I can communicate well, and I have some relationships, praise God.
Yeah.
Just realizing that, we long to see a movement taking place. And this is something that's going to take decades. And there's going to be another generation after us that's going to come in and take up the mantle. If we're thinking long term, then we got to be ready to put in the work for this foundation. It's going to be slow, and we're digging the trenches right now. But once those trenches are really dug out and we're settled, we're in a good tactical position, we're ready for the battle. It's not exciting, but it's important. Just keeping that vision at the forefront. That's what I've been learning, at least this past year and a half.
Yeah. How about in terms of some of the cultural interactions, friends? Have you found it fairly easy to make friends and get to know people?
Definitely harder than I thought it would be. I'm
a
big extrovert. I typically talking with people, asking questions, and so pretty quick to make relationships. But I think there was a few different factors. COVID was kind of at a peak when we arrived, so that initially made it hard with relationships. But I think that you really have to, at least in an environment where there's not many Christians or there's not a well-established church, you really have to be able to throw yourself into it. And people most likely are not going to initiate things with you. You have to initiate with them. And they're very loving, they're very kind and respectful, but you have to take that step. So I think I've struggled with that. Even though I'm like a go-getter and like to be out, I've struggled to really take that plunge. And I think it can be intimidating. You feel like a little kid walking around trying to say the names of vegetables or whatever, But it's a process. And I think like in the sports world, we remember that so well, of like these players that we've recruited and we're training them up and they're getting better and better. And so just trying to like remind myself, I might not be where I want to be relationally. And I definitely don't have as many friends as I wish I had, but that if I can keep working at it, I think the biggest mistake would be if I went, didn't make any friends in Coral Line. Like, guess that's it.
Yeah.
Let's just call it. We just got to kind of keep pushing on and just those little steps. So it's hard, but it's so good. And then when something happens, it's incredible. Like that one conversation with a neighbor or connecting with some students at a school. It's just like, this is huge. This is God at work. And so, I think relationships didn't come as naturally as I thought they would, but I'm learning so much about what it looks like to make relationships, because there's a lot of similarities, but there's a few differences as well. And so I feel like I've learned a lot from you, Travis, about the way you approach relationships and really pushing yourself. I'm curious what keeps you from growing discouraged or just, man, this is so hard.
I definitely experience plenty of that when you go out with your friends And like, you're like, cool, I'm having a Khmer conversation, like cool. And then they talk with their friends and you're like, oh my gosh, what language? Well, what? I did not catch any of that.
Right.
Like,
Right.
okay, so you were just talking slow for me.
Yep.
Thanks. But I appreciated it. And that's unknowingly what I've done with other people that don't know English that well, right?
Yeah.
And not to talk down to them, but you're just trying to communicate with some basic words so they can follow along and you can have a conversation, you can have a relationship. And that pays off in time. And as their language gets higher, then we can go deeper and we can have deeper conversations. But now I'm on the other side and I have to look for people who are willing to be patient with me. And I think you have to make so many mistakes. Like I was thinking, like, you're totally right. Like I have to be the one initiating. And because there's a little bit of cultural thing, but then if I make the mistakes, we're okay with laughing at me. You know, I'm okay. As long as I'm okay with that, that's great.
Right.
And then I can take those risks.
Yeah.
But like, in the first few years, I mean, I still have people on Facebook that I'm like, who is that? It's probably someone I met on a bus or like in a grocery store.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of what it takes. And then with that, I do have some really close friends from the first few years that I've gone to their house. I've spent the night at their house.
Awesome.
I know their parents. Whenever we're talking, it's like, hey, how are your parents?
Yeah.
You know, and we go to visit them during Khmer New Year and bring a gift for them. But it's not easy.
Right. So I just like one thing that you said that really hit me is talking about not afraid to make mistakes and brainstorming here, because I feel like there's some character trait there we can all work on, whether you're coming to Cambodia or not, that really sets you up to take that risk. What do you think is there? But like that, I'm not afraid to look like a fool because I'm just trying.
I think that's it. It's like, I've made so many mistakes in the past. Like I was thinking the other day as I was trying to help someone make a call or make a negotiation.
Yeah.
And I was, where do I even start? And realizing, reflecting, oh yeah, that literally all my knowledge from that comes from making a ton of mistakes in that area.
Yeah.
And getting ripped off on deals and then learning from it. I think it does require humility. And that is not easy. And it's sometimes frustrating for me as well. And sometimes I need to check myself with that. So I think humility to genuinely be able to just laugh and be like, oh, silly me. I think you have to have humility. And so I think the times that I definitely don't want to make mistakes, sometimes it's just me being, I don't know, I don't want to look bad or be embarrassed. And I think once you've been embarrassed a few times, and it's like so hard. Like I remember the first few times that we all remember our most embarrassing moment.
Oh, yeah.
But once you've gone through that a few times, it's kind of like, okay, that's the worst.
Yeah.
The other thing is like, I can make some pretty bad cultural mistakes, but that's why I talk with people to just ask them some of those things in advance. And then that helps me avoid the major difficulties.
Yeah.
And then I think also purpose and just realizing, hey, my mistake, my humiliation is going to result in a closer friendship.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll be exposed to Christ. So that is a small price to pay.
Oh, yeah.
That's how I think of it.
I think if we really get to the part of it, my resistance to looking like a fool is because I think I should look better than that. I think people should think I look competent, successful.
You do.
It's my hair, isn't it?
It's the tat.
And so I'm afraid of taking this risk because if it doesn't work out, then I'm showing what I'm afraid is really there. So there's identity as well. I see it playing out in a very practical way. I've just started to get involved at the local high school. So I go 2 days a week and I teach basketball to a bunch of high school girls who have never played basketball in their lives. And it's fantastic. Okay. And going there, I'm the only white person who walks into school and everyone is very blatantly like checking me out. I hear comments of, oh, foreigner. My word foreigner, a lot of times they use for the French guy. So it's like, French guy. Okay, whatever. Even though I don't mind being in the spotlight, it can get to me sometimes.
Yeah.
And you just feel so like, what am I doing here? How should I even act in this situation?
Totally.
I've realized it seems simple enough, but like the days where I would show up at the school praying, and I'm like, God, please lead this class. I'm here for you. It's about you. It kind of just like flows over me. But then the times that I'm rushed and I'm like, oh, I forgot to plan out this, this exercise we're doing, and then it's hits me, and I'm more rattled, I'm more questioning. And so I think a lot of it for me comes back to identity. What am I rooted in?
That's so good. Right on. So that's like a nice way for our final topic, which would be about rest, pausing, about prayer, about how do you sustain? Because kind of what you described, I've definitely gone through of rushed, and I miss so much. Whereas I felt at first, I was like, my focus is about ministry and about outreaching to people. So I had time and space to think and pray and focus on that. And sometimes I catch myself getting into my American mode and I'm just like doing.
Yeah.
So how do you rest? How do you pray? How do you make it for the long run?
I think my wife and I were like trying to figure that out right now.
Yeah.
It's a growing area of life for us. But I think some of the things that we've learned along this journey have been, even before coming to Cambodia, we were really starting to explore Sabbath and what does that look like.
Great.
And I was familiar growing up with that and that word used as far as like a rest day, but really coming to find that I viewed my Sabbath, my rest day, selfishly. Okay, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to watch movies or play a video game, whatever.
Yeah.
And when I've started working towards viewing it as a day for the Lord, and that I'm doing things that I delight in, fill me up. And most importantly, I'm like delighting in God. Like I'm finding life in his presence. And it's so hard because like in our minds, like you said, we're rushing through things and you approach, whatever your day off is. And it's like, okay, great. I can sleep in. And then, I don't know what I'll do. I'll like go get a coffee or something. And you just kind of start without even realizing it. You're just rushing and going through the one day that's supposed to be the day that you stop and are still with the Lord. And I just think so much of how many of my rest days end where I am so tired, so worn out. I haven't done a single thing. So now I'm stressed too, because now there's a lot of stuff that has to get done. And it's just such a waste. I want to see it for what it is. And it's really a day to be filled. So what things do I need to do that are going to be fulfilling? They're going to fill me up.
Yeah. Can you give us some examples?
I am a morning person. And so I think it's so important for me to really start the day well. And so weirdly enough, I can be really disciplined with my quiet time with the Lord the other 6 work days. And then I get to my rest day and it's like sleep in. And then, my wife and I, we want to like get out of the house. So then we go. And all of a sudden, like the one thing that really is the focus of the day, connecting with God, hasn't even happened. And it's not until 2 p.m. or whatever, I'm back home where I realize I even like thought about God at all today. It's the Sabbath, dang it. So I think for me, really starting with some silence and stillness, that's really important for me, my temperament, because I do like to just go and I like action and excitement. So sometimes it can feel a little painful, but even just 10 minutes, man, it really grounds me for the day. And then doing things, I have to recognize what is filling and what are just things I like to do, because I can like just play around on some games on my phone, but it's not filling.
Yeah, good point.
And trying to do things, playing some guitar, that's just reading books. Usually it takes more energy than just watching a TV show.
Yeah.
But it's actually recharges. I think so often we separate our soul life from the physical and the emotional. So we take care of ourselves physically and we try to like de-stress emotionally with the most important aspect of us, our souls. What are we doing to tend to that? And for me, it's often lacking. So this is someone who does not do it right, but is shooting towards this target.
And I want to hear your thoughts on phones, because when I first came to Cambodia, sometimes I just wouldn't even take out my phone because I didn't want to come across as that wealthy foreigner, even if I was.
Right.
But like you don't feel like it's just wrong to be like waving around an iPhone in the provinces. But in time, most people have phones. Many of my local friends have a nicer phone than me. So that's great. Now it's just common. I feel like it was much more common to like have a conversation, and me being off the phone forced me to have more conversation and spend less time on my own.
Right.
And then now we got phones going on. So just kind of briefly, what do you do to kind of control that in your life?
I mean, which I will speak very directly and honestly with you. I would
should
say,
ask our wives to comment on this for us.
Exactly, yeah. I would say right now I don't have the balance I long for. So I would say rather than controlling my phone, I'm much more controlled by my phone. And I think what you said earlier is just kind of like what we have to do. And I think specifically like our younger generation, we wrestle with this. It's just got to do it. You just got to put it away.
Yeah.
And
It's like working out. You just got to do it.
yeah, exactly. And so I think I've heard people who turn the phone completely off and it's just totally off the whole 24 hours. I really think 24-hour period is important. It's hard to give up that much time where you're really like, I'm going to trust that the Lord is going to continue on whatever work or ministry is happening without me.
Yeah.
And so 24 hours where either my phone's off or maybe it's like, okay, I need to leave my phone on because maybe my wife's going to call me, but I'm not on social media. I'm not playing games, whatever it is, because it is such a distraction, man.
Yeah.
You talk about addiction, like I'm in that anonymous group right now. It's like,
Which start with your name.
That's right. That's right.
Oh man. Yeah. I can relate much more nowadays than I could use back in the day, because I felt like I got so much of my adrenaline or my stimulation rush from like just being in Cambodia. But I think that now I think the phone steals it in a lot of ways. And sometimes it's good in terms of connecting with friends. But again, that's not nearly as good as we come over and we share a meal. I do like the turning off the phone. I mean, mornings when I wake up and my phone's off, it's so good because it just reminds me, it's like I don't need that.
Yeah.
And let me have some quiet time. I love that. So, well, maybe we can keep each other accountable on that for the next few Sabbaths.
Let's
we can
do
try
it.
and
Let's
do
it.
24-hour phone off, except for wife.
Except for wife.
Except for,
There's an asterisk there.
we should get one of those brick phones. They're probably like $10 now. The other thing I was going to throw out there is like I did turn off notifications on like a whole bunch of apps one time, like for some sort of fasting period, trying to do no YouTube, my bane. But that was really helpful too, just not to have the constant notifications popping up.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool.
That's true. Because, I mean, ultimately, at the heart of it, this is meant to be a day where like you are full of life.
Yes.
And I think so many of us, wherever in the world you are, we get to the end of the week and it's just like, I scraped by. I barely made it. And then you get through like your rest day and you're into the next week where you're just grueling every day. And so having a day that's truly about the meaning of what life is, like that we and God are together, that he's dwelling with his people. And so we have this little home here in our little community that for one day a week is just brimming with his presence and with life and joy. And I think so often, man, I just downplay what that day is. And it's just, it's another rest day. Like, I'll check my emails, like, wait till the baby's asleep, and I'll get some stuff done. And it just misses the point. I think we all really could use some recentering one day a week.
Amen. Well, hey, that's a pretty good place to end. I think we'll do that for now. There's plenty more questions I have for you. We'll definitely be having you back on again when you're in town. Maybe I'll be visiting you in the province.
Yeah, please do. Bring the party up.
Yeah. Our wives and kids can hang out.
I hope this encourages you. And by encourage, I mean gives you the courage to follow God's calling in your life, whatever, wherever that may be. If you're interested in missions abroad, regardless of your professional background, check out opportunities.omf.org. I only promote things that I truly believe in or that I've used myself, and this is something that I've used several times in my missionary training. Check it out. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. Peace.